Greetings, listening guys. Welcome back to what feels like a very, very, very overdue podcast. Welcome. If this is your first time, I'm Grayson Mann. Welcome to the Man with the Plan podcast. This is episode 160. And the last time we met, it was about 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago. I filmed the podcast with Toby Corsten of the Tiger and Tiger Vision, soon to be TigerIllustrated.com, if that hasn't been made official already. We talked about Clemson in the Sweet 16, so that tells you how long it's been. And I've had so many supportive comments, DMs, messages talking about how much they've missed the show, how much they've just been supporting me as I've finished up Clemson. I graduated this Friday, actually, rather, on the 10th, and I'm officially a Clemson alum. So just thank you if you've been supportive along the way. I don't want to make this all about me. This is going to be a fun time. I'm hoping to get content out as much as I can as things change, things progress. I got some exciting things I'll announce down the road closer to the end of May. But trust me, it sort of provides the new direction of where I'm headed in terms of my career and what we can expect from this podcasting, podcast content in general. So today I want to talk about a couple things. I want to quickly talk about Clemson and Georgia, the noon kickoff, what I think it means for both of these programs moving forward. I know that a noon kickoff in the grand scheme of things sounds very, very insignificant, but in May, we're reaching for everything we can take here. And I guess in the return episode, it's fitting that I talk a little bit about the Clemson Tigers in some sense, in some formality. And we'll talk about JJ Reddick and his potential prospects as an NBA head coach, particularly with LeBron James and the Lakers. There's so many storylines with that. And I think that I actually I fall in love with it. But let's start with Clemson and UGA, the big kickoff game. Now, Clemson and Georgia have met, I believe, 5 times in the last 10 years. The last time they met was in 2021, where Georgia won 10-3 in a very defensive slugfest as Georgia started to cement their mini dynasty, winning back-to-back national championships from there, going 29-1 or 29-2, I believe. I don't know what the exact number is. I know there's going to be a Bulldog fan somewhere listening, and you know who you are. But that was sort of the crux, that beginning of it. JT Daniels and DJ Uyunglele were the starting quarterbacks in that game. So it tells you how much has changed within both programs. And with this being a noon kickoff, I always love when times get dropped here in Clemson, South Carolina for football games because there's either this pure joy and this pure celebration when it's 3:30 or 8 because it's late kickoff. You get to tailgate, you get to hang out more with family and friends. And noons always feel like, you got to get up for them. You got to really get yourself psyched up because we're all used to sleeping in on a Saturday, even though it's a football Saturday. We want to get a little bit of a rest, a break. And noons are usually associated with, okay, it's the first slate. It's sort of the way for people to get into football Saturday. It's different from the 1 to 4 because there's only really 2 slots besides the Sunday night football prime time in the NFL. But the way I perceive Clemson and Georgia in 2021 are much different than how I perceive them in 2024. 2021, I felt Clemson was on the crux of another 5-star quarterback with DJ Uyunglele. And I thought Georgia was still sort of figuring out with Kirby Smart, certainly a contender for the college football playoff. But I think in many people's minds, and I guess depending on if you were on the Clemson beat or not, there's obviously some fascinating details about how the spring and summer workouts for Clemson went, sort of paved the way for how that Georgia result ended up playing out. But I felt perception was everything. It was a Georgia team that felt like they were on the rise. They had a strong 2020 season. Clemson just came off of Trevor Lawrence being the #1 draft pick, losing to Ohio State in the college football playoff semifinals. There's a lot riding on this. Both programs, marquee matchup. I believe both were in the top 5 in 2021. This won't be the case. Georgia will probably be in the top 5, if I had to guess, maybe top 2, heading into this matchup against Clemson. Clemson maybe hanging around in the late 20s, teens, maybe. It just depends on perception. And that's what I want to harp on is the perception of these two programs now. 3 years later, Clemson hasn't made it to the college football playoff once, scratched 10 wins twice, one in ugly fashion, winning in the Cheez-It Bowl against Iowa State, another one in the Orange Bowl, losing to Tennessee. But that perception of Clemson no longer being this national perennial superpower versus Georgia, who is a household name in the Southeast. Nick Saban's gone. Georgia feels like they've covered a lot more ground in the last couple of years, especially winning a national championship in back-to-back seasons, blowing the brakes off of TCU, taking down Nick Saban in Alabama in his last appearance in the national championship, not his last college football appearance, however. But the perception has changed. I view these programs on completely different trajectories right now. Clemson just came off an 8-win season, beating Kentucky in the Gator Bowl. Georgia just finished a season in which they trounced Florida State by 60 in the Orange Bowl. Many view Georgia as a playoff team, but just got a bad break, losing to Alabama in the SEC championship. And so I've always told people I view Clemson Georgia as a matchup where I think it's going to be close for about 2.5 quarters, and then you'll see Georgia start to pull away. And I think the perception of this noon kick, I think the college football schedule makers, and money's everything, especially in this world of college football. We have NIL, we have so much circling around this big symbol. If you can see on my YouTube audience, I'm pointing above my head, it's big gold dollar sign that dictates everything. And the NFL understands this, the way they schedule their matchups. Mahomes on NFL kickoff against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, putting him at the face of the NFL. And the slate, I believe, is for that day. It's Clemson and Georgia at noon. I think Miami plays at 3:30 against Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And Texas A&M plays against Notre Dame in the 8 p.m. slot, which many thought was going to be dominated by Clemson and Georgia, just because that's a marquee matchup. It's a rivalry, but you have an A&M team that's without Jimbo Fisher coming off a disappointing year. Notre Dame, Riley Leonard comes in, no Sam Hartman for that 1 year at Notre Dame. It's just weird to figure out. That's going to be a tough program to discern where they're headed. I guess we'll read a lot about that, and we can potentially do previews if you want to see that too. I have some people that I'd love to bring on the podcast over the summer to talk about specific programs. But within this window of this noon kickoff, I think what college football is telling you is one program's headed in another direction, and Georgia's sort of just staying in this radius of top 5 perennial college football playoff contenders for the foreseeable future. Kirby Smart's built a dominant powerhouse in the Southeast, and Dabo, little old Dabo in this Power 4, was the only school with, I believe, Air Force and another school that's escaping my mind, is the only one not to take a transfer and sort of sticking to this old way. This isn't a conversation about the transfer portal. This isn't a conversation about what Clemson is doing as a program, but I think the perception of a noon kickoff, one where, yes, it's college football Saturday, it's considered a prime time slot. People are going to be flocking to it. People are going to be interested for sure. But does it hit that same aura as Florida State LSU last year, getting a slow, low slot 2 years in a row? Both programs felt to be on the rise. At Jordan Travis in the ACC, can Florida State be that perennial team? Many believe them to be a favorite, and they ended up winning the ACC championship, albeit in a different fashion than I think people expected. Now, Clemson, coming off of a 4-4 start, won 4 straight games, won their bowl game. You had the infamous Tyler from Spartanburg deal. You had a lot of questions about where this program is headed. Many strange games. I'll tell you, it's the strangest football season. I've only covered 2 seasons, and I don't know where that future lies for me on the beat. But the strangest season where some of the most uncharacteristic things happen, and it just felt like something was missing. And whether you how do you feel about Klubnik and how you feel about where Clemson is as a whole, Georgia's on a completely different level right now, and I think that's completely fair to have that assessment. So I think when you look at these two programs, it may feel like just another noon kickoff where Georgia's going to take care of business. It's not that Clemson has no shot. I believe they do with their defense that they have and the talent they're going to bring back on that front, with the front seven, with some new receivers that are coming in. It may be just enough what Clemson needs. There's always been that hallmark, that mark on Clemson, that there's not a wide receiver elite talent on that roster. They may have that now with Wesco or TJ Moore, but it is enough to beat mighty UGA, who's going to be a double-digit favorite. I think the noon kickoff says a lot more about perception and what they think people want to see. They want people to see A&M and Notre Dame, big brands, of course, not a ton of success to back up that brand, or even the 3:30 slot with Florida and I think it's Florida and Miami. Sorry, lost it there for a second, but the perception with these programs is going to be everything. And on August 31st, they might tell us, hey, Clemson is a little bit closer than we think to getting back to where they were in the 2010s as this consistent powerhouse that was a college football playoff favorite. Are they one this year? I think it depends on who you ask. Georgia absolutely should win the SEC and should be favored by a mile. But when you look at the perception, and I've used that word, I'd like to harp on that a lot, because I think when you look from 2021 to now, both of these programs, if there we have a crossroad, we have one path being a ton of success and one path being a very mixed bag. Clemson and Georgia took very separate routes. And I think if you had told somebody in 2021 after that game, because you could have logically assumed after the 10-3 matchup that it's just two great defenses going at it. It's one of those classic, gotta have them college football games in this rare era of offensive just firepower. You could have go, okay, yeah, that I can see they were a little sloppy, a little rusty. Both teams were a bad throw, a bad route away from it being 3-3 in overtime. So Clemson definitely hung around there. If the offense can figure it out, they'll be fine. But if you had told me someone walking out of Bank of America Stadium that these were that Georgia was going to go on to win back-to-back national championships and Clemson wouldn't sniff a college football playoff, they lose to South Carolina once. They've had some really whiffs. They lose to NC State twice. They would lose to Florida State. They had a lot of streaks. They would only go to one ACC championship and albeit win it. Both programs in very different directions, and I think that kickoff time certainly reflects it. So the other topic I wanted to talk about today, with shifting gears to the NBA, I know you can see the Celtics thing in the background along with some of those press passes, but the crazy thing about the NBA playoffs is, and I don't have a ton to say on it. I still think it's Denver, Boston, and I think I'm just going to leave it at that. The other NBA story that I wanted to chase, and I heard this on the radio this morning after a workout, was that, wow, the Lakers wanted somebody, and this plays into why I believe JJ Reddick might be this perfect fit for Los Angeles, and we'll get into the pros and cons of it. But it came out that they wanted a grinder, someone that was taking long hours into the film room, doing this, doing that. And I just found it fascinating. And there's always that phrase that if something wants to get leaked out, it absolutely will. It just depends on who's has the information and has the power to be able to convey that information, how much of that information they want to put out. And with JJ Reddick in the Lakers, and I know his name has been floated around, I think just a quick couple minutes on JJ Reddick, amazing basketball mind. I don't know if anybody listens to his podcast. I guess one podcast advertisement that's incredibly small to one that's one of the biggest basketball podcasts in the world. Just listening to Redick talk about basketball and the way he conveys that information, the way he explains complex NBA schemes, it seems so simple. It seems so articulate. There's a lot going on in JJ's mind for sure. And the way he sort of built his brand is this intelligent, breaks it down, no nonsense way of breaking down the NBA. And I listen to it very frequently when I want to hear what he thinks about the NBA playoffs or listen to his NBA broadcasts on ESPN along with Mike Breen, who was a great choice to replace Mark Jackson and Van Gundy. I think that there's a lot of intrigue to this with Redick and the Lakers. Now, I think one of the key things is, and it circles around what LeBron James is going to do this offseason. He's a pending free agent. The Lakers haven't shown any progress from last year. They got swept by Denver, and then they got gentlemen swept by Denver in this postseason after making a run to the Western Conference Finals last year. And I thought the Lakers were a much better team. Anthony Davis played a much better season. I think he was as healthy as he's been in years. So there's a lot of context with that. But then there's also the Bronny James situation. And I'm a full believer that LeBron is 100% serious on if Bronny James is drafted in the NBA, that's the team is going to go play for. We've never seen it done before. It would add to sort of the legacy and the intrigue of LeBron James of, hey, he played so long in the NBA that he was able to sort of will his way to playing with his own son. And that's a fascinating topic and a fascinating storyline for another time. So where does JJ Reddick fit into this picture? Obviously, if you've seen, he and LeBron have a new podcast where they break down NBA strategies, where they break down certain tidbits of their careers and sort of different situations. How would you react to this? LeBron, take me through this game and this action. What's so important about that? And the way they sort of talk back and forth, the dialogue, there's a clear respect from LeBron to Redick to not only start this podcast, give some of LeBron's time, it just feels like the two have a good rapport. And whether they continue a podcast or not outside of the coaching scheme, it's evident the two have a strong relationship. And I think that's so important in LeBron, this stage in LeBron's career, that he doesn't have a lot of time left. It's the way he's sort of taking games off, the amount of just leverage, I guess, not leverage in the sense of power and control, but how much he's willing to exert out on the court. There's certain times where he's not hunting matchups anymore. It's just picking the right spot and getting shots off here and there. There are certain moments where it's not the same, and obviously not. It's year 21, year 22 for LeBron James. There's a lot of mileage on this vehicle that he's driven for so long. And I think a coach at this stage in this career that not only makes him comfortable, but someone that he respects would be very important for Los Angeles. So if you snag JJ Reddick, someone that's shown intelligence, someone that's shown the way to be articulate, relate to the players. And I think what's so important for the Lakers is to get a coach not only that LeBron buys into, because within that scope of the Lakers locker room, there's so many moving parts. There's been such, even when they're not very good, the Lakers are the Lakers. There's a lot going down on. They're always on a microscope. And within that locker room, there's 15 guys that have to buy into one voice, whether that's an established voice like Kenny Atkinson, whether it's an established voice like Sam Cassell, who was linked to the Lakers job as Celtics assistant coach, that's been pivotal to helping Jason Tatum's game this year. Having that coach in the room, and this can't be a Steve Nash situation where Steve Nash comes in, KD and Kyrie. It's evident there's not a ton of hierarchy there, and it became a big mess with him, Harden, and KD. So you look at that situation, I think probably a lot of people may make that comparison. Uh, Player with no coaching experience whatsoever. It's can LeBron buy in? Because if LeBron buys in, very logically, we would assume that the rest of the locker room in turn would follow suit. And you have your structure, you have a good coaching staff that buys in, and Redick's able to learn on the fly. We've seen plenty of coaches, we've seen plenty of experienced guys. You've seen Jason Kidd. Didn't work out in the first stint, but it feels like Dallas, he's landed and really planted a foundation there. Ty Lue with Cleveland, winning an NBA title with LeBron specifically pretty solid with the Clippers. So there's evidence for sure of these former players making it work, working up the coaching ladder. It's a little bit more unorthodox with the way Redick sort of built a rapport as this really intelligent NBA player on First Take, on NBA broadcast, on his Old Man in the Three podcast. So it is very strange. And in this world where I think Doug Gottlieb gets a job in Green Bay for just being a sports analyst, and he's going to continue his role in Fox Sports. So the way sports media and sports as a entity are forever connected, forever changing. It's so fascinating to see how these two things. And I think that with this JJ Reddick piece, it just says how much not only fans but players sort of respect that different line of work, I guess. There's so many moving parts with this. Now, Redick may not get hired. He may just get an interview. He may get a look, and I have no doubt that Redick would be fantastic in interviews, just the way he's well spoken. He's media trained. There's a lot of good things to like about that. And so I think the one thing the Lakers need to do is, can you buy in? What's LeBron going to do with Bronny when that eventually plays out? So with Los Angeles, this head coaching decision may be able to keep LeBron James here. So there's a lot of things that surround LeBron in this situation. Is he going to stay with Bronny? Where's Bronny going to go? Can Redick be someone that LeBron can buy into and get the rest of the locker room? Because there was a lot of tension with Darvin Ham with certain rotational decisions within that Lakers organization. Like I said earlier, this is one of those few organizations, I think Boston, Denver, Los Angeles, the Clippers, the Lakers, these big market teams, the Knicks, they're always going to be under a microscope, whether you're winning a championship like Denver is, that's not typically a big market, but is now because of guys like Nikola Jokic and the way they're viewed as a potential front door to a dynasty. This could be a back-to-back run for Denver, and very much looks like it after they were pronounced dead at a rival in Minnesota in Game 3. So to be under that microscope and for there to be tensions, for there to be rumors that Ham maybe not have been working hard enough, you keep bringing a guy like Redick, who has an unorthodox path for sure as an NBA head coach, which is only going to heighten the media attention surrounding him. But all you need is one buy-in, and it's LeBron. And if you get that, then you're making those careful steps with his last part of his career, so much surrounding what he's going to do with his family in the next couple years, with his son entering the NBA draft. there's a lot of fascinating pieces, and somehow, some way, JJ Reddick's found a way to fit himself as a puzzle piece into what the Lakers' future is with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And it's going to be fascinating. If I had to predict, I guess he doesn't, but this is sort of the if he does, if you can get LeBron's buy-in, possibilities are endless. And it's going to be exciting to see how it all plays out in the coming weeks with the NBA draft, the NBA playoffs, and the NBA offseason as a whole. So, guys, I hope that was a pretty hopefully, yeah, like we returned, we're back, and I will not retreat into a hole for the next 6 weeks. We got a fascinating guest coming up this weekend. That good friend of mine, good friend of this podcast for sure. Very excited about that. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any helpful comments, critique, feedback, any of that stuff, you name it, happy to hear it. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for all the comments, support. It really has meant the world to. At the same time, when I'm not making episodes, people are going, "Where in the world are you?" And it's just nice to know you guys care, and the show has made enough of an impact to have people miss it, I guess, which it's humbling, it's awesome, and I really appreciate it. So, guys, hope you take care. You have a fantastic week, great summer, vacations. It's going to be a fun next 3 months. I'm very excited about it. Guys, take care as always. Have a great day and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you, guys. See you soon.